It was a bit of a fluke, actually. I was working on apartments and resort complexes in Orlando, and I got a call from some folks in Los Angeles saying that we heard you might be someone we should talk to about this new theme park we're building called Universal Studios Florida. So I came out here and I talked to them, and we sat down for a while, and I wasn't too terribly interested nor terribly aware of what the heck a theme park was, quite honestly, until these guys opened up the doors to this giant model of Universal Studios Florida that just blew me away, took my breath away, and I looked at it and I said, well, sign me up. It was just of a magnitude and scale, these crazy attractions and these wonderful environments, and recreating movies, and dealing with submerging people into this movie concept that was really spectacular, and that was back in 1988.
Well, on Islands of Adventure, I was actually the first person hired 10 years ago, and was charged with running the team under Phil Hedema, our senior creative director, running the team to do the development for the park. And that was a 4-year process before we brought in the big staff. There were actually only 5 of us working the first 2 years, and then the staff expanded to about 10, and then to the 350 that it took to actually build the park.
I headed up the design team for Islands of Adventure, which are the 5 themed islands, Seuss Landing, Lost Continent, Jurassic Park, Toon Lagoon, and Superhero Island.
It took us 8 years actually to develop from the initial ideas and concepts to the finished park that you see today.
Well, we were trying to create something that was truly unique and different, and within the context of the big ideas, those big ideas being Dr. Seuss's writings and illustrations and the world of the Marvel characters, there are a hit parade of characters, within those families that are pretty extraordinary. So you tend to gravitate to the top of the hit parade.
Well, on this project, actually, I was called the Bronze Butt on this project. That is because they always sent me out to do the things that the Silver Butt, the Gold Butt, and the Platinum Butt, it wasn't safe enough yet to do. So I went all over the place to ride things and do things that were crazy. And when we were developing the Hulk roller coaster, we had this idea of the catapult launch, the acceleration out of this launch tube. It was a great idea, but we had to actually test it. We had to figure out a way to mock it up and be able to ride it in a somewhat safe manner for us before we put the big guys on it so that they could experience it as well. So we took a couple of box cars, we literally welded them together, we took them and we tilted them up on end in an old steel yard. And we welded a steel fin right down the center of it, and we took an old dune buggy and we attached that to this fin. We ran a cable up the top, through a hole in the top, and put a weight on it. So we would show up, put ourselves in our helmets and armor and gear and all that sort of stuff, strap in, and they would drop this weight, and we would be pulled up through this double box car to give us the feeling of accelerating through the tunnel. Someone thought it was a really funny joke that they would paint a target at the end of this box car. So that was the thing that we saw as we went racing towards it. So we put different kinds of weights, etc., and we would ride it at 1G, at 2G, at 4G, at 6G, until we finally settled in half a G, 1G. We decided 1G was where we wanted to be.
Well, we first started thinking about the Hulk, the Incredible Hulk coaster, and like with everything we've done, what we've tried to do is tell a really compelling story and use state-of-the-art engineering to turn that story into a visceral experience. So in the case of the Incredible Hulk, we wanted to use really a state-of-the-art coaster, really start with a state-of-the-art coaster, and then kick it up a notch or two. And we can talk about that. But the real essence of the Hulk was, if you know the story, it's really a dichotomy of rage and intellect that really, drives this character, the Hulk, around. So we tried to come up with an idea that would translate that concept into a visceral ride experience, which resulted in both the booster addition to a state-of-the-art steel coaster and the zero-G roll at the top of the coaster.
One of the things about Florida is that there's a height restriction. We have a 200-foot ceiling. So when we began designing these coasters, we knew that was a limitation that we had to stick to. And so we began to discover different ways of making a coaster exciting than being the tallest. That's where the catapult actually came from. We needed to give you the acceleration to give you the high loop and the cobra roll and all the other things that are further along in the attraction. So we needed to fake the height, and that's actually what the accelerator does. By giving you the thrust behind, it basically gives you the gravity of being a much higher coaster.
They're extraordinary guys. I mean, these guys are brilliant. You know, to sort out the loading and the steel and, you know, the whole geometry of delivering these kind of thrills it blows my mind.
It's an interesting story when we've had our first meeting with B&M, because I had sort of figured out what I wanted in the coaster with the accelerator launch and the Heartline roll and all of the different movements that the coaster has in a row. And we'd figured that out and we thought it through. And we met with B&M and they said, well, tell us what you want in a coaster. And so I began this big long speech about accelerator, and went through the whole 9 yards. And finally at the end he stopped me and he said, you forgot to add, he says, do you want a good coaster?
The booster of the Incredible Hulk is created through the use of a series of synchronized motors, about 220 of them. It's like 110 on each side. And those motors spin up and they grab a fin at the bottom of the coaster. And they spin up at different velocities as you head up the coaster, and that creates the acceleration.
If we were just to plug into the normal Orlando grid, we'd probably create a brownout, and we didn't want that to happen, turning television sets off all over Orlando. So we'd actually developed a system of generators that would charge capacitors all the time, and then when we needed to actually launch the coaster, we would discharge the capacitors and get that surge of energy. So we're actually creating energy to launch the coasters ourselves.
Queue lines are pretty tricky things. You know, people wind up spending a fair bit of time in those, and one of the things we did at Islands of Adventure was try to take the story of the actual ride and bring it well out to really expand the experience. So the queue is a place where we start to tell the story, and in the case of Hulk, we started to tell essentially the whole history of the Incredible Hulk, you know, how the original overexposure to gamma rays occurred, and then what transpired, you know, from there. So that queue gave us the ability to sort of set up that whole experience.
Dueling Dragons, because we wanted the coasters to meet and actually duel and intertwine, the idea of two coasters, the idea of showing courage by riding on the backs of dragons and dueling in the air was really kind of the basic idea behind Dueling Dragons. And so we had to develop a system that allowed two coasters to meet at various places along the track. And they weren't identical tracks, they each had individual moves. And so we developed a way that as the coasters go up the lift, and they're dispatched from the dispatch building at the same time, as they go up the lift, we actually weigh the coasters. And if you watch, they'll move and adjust themselves in position as they vie for position. The lighter coaster goes over first. The heavier coaster goes over second because it's got more inertia to catch up to the other coaster. And so a big mathematical calculation is done so we know exactly how far apart they're supposed to be, and they'll drop over the other side. So they'll meet in those three locations that we want you to.
Well, the Lost Continent is all about myths and legends. You know, each of the attractions in the Lost Continent strives to bring to life one of those great stories. So we have, you know, Poseidon, and we have Sinbad, and then we had this idea for a coaster unlike any coaster around, and the thought was to combine two state-of-the-art coasters. And unlike, you know, conventional wisdom would say, you know, avoid all objects, we intentionally set these two things out on a collision course to create near misses at really incredibly high speeds. So the idea behind that was driven out of the notion of taking two dragons, you know, and having this sort of dogfight or dragon fight in the air.
All ride systems have safety envelopes, and it's as far as you can reach plus a little bit more based on where you're attached into the harness. When our coasters come together in the loop or when they come against the wall, at the edge of that safety margin, we've added only 18 inches. So you can come as close as 18 inches from another person or another object?
Well, we set to, we set out to try and minimize the distance between those near misses, obviously, to make them feel as real as we possibly could. So whether you're going right up, what it feels like you're going right up against the wall of the castle or coming, toe-to-toe with the other coaster, there is a space between the two coasters that is ample enough to ensure that that would never happen.
The coaster's designed in Germany, but actually manufactured here in the United States. And a different company lays the footings, and another company comes in and assembles the struts, and then the track is brought in piece by piece, fitted into place. And then there was that final day in Dueling Dragons where we brought the last piece of the fire coaster in. It was craned into place, dropped in. The 8 bolts were just slid into place. It was perfect. It's kind of like building 2 railroad tracks, bringing them together and hoping that they're going to meet, and it was perfect.
Well, we learn all about this great castle in the queue. There was once this wonderful kingdom, this prospering society, growing out in the North Woods there, and until a couple of these dragons showed up on the scene and decided to have their way with the riches of the land, pretty much chased off all the people, stole all the treasure, and inhabited this castle. And so our friend Merlin warns us all the way through the castle that, we shouldn't be here, you should turn back, and there's all kinds of messages along the way, some of them from Merlin and some of them from the dragons, warning us that, this is no place to be.
Both our 2 coasters, we wanted a different sensation from, we wanted a different way to hear them. The Hulk coaster was all about losing control of your emotions and powerful and ripping through the air and all of that sort of stuff. So we actually tuned the wheels on the Hulk coaster. We went out and we looked at many, many different types of compounds, rubber compounds and silicones and all that sort of stuff, and listened to the coaster vehicle as it ran through the track, just to tune it to get the right sound. In Dueling Dragons, we wanted to be very quiet, this sort of the sense of gliding, flying on the wings of a dragon. It might be quite quiet up there in the air. So we took the backbone of the coaster and we put a plastic liner on it and we filled it with pea gravel and made it quite a bit heavier, but it also dampened all the noise. So you stand off to the side and it's very quiet. And it's very quiet when you ride it, and all you can hear are other people screaming.
Both the coasters are really unique and different, and I quite honestly haven't really nailed down which one I like better. Sort of on a given day, which one has the kind of dynamic you're up for that day. But Ice has this great near miss with the castle that happens right at the Cobra roll, and Fire has a weightless camelback. And both those moves are, to me, my favorite 2 moves on the coaster, and they happen on 2 different coasters. And if you look at the way the 2 coasters are laid out, all 3 of those near misses occur on axes between the mouth of the 2 dragons. When you stand out in the foreground of the attraction, you look through the 2 dragons that are kind of like this, you see all 3 of the near misses that kind of line up, and the highest thing being the first drop off the coaster. It took a lot of reinforcing that one line through the development process that ensured that would happen.
Well, I could tell you about Universal's future development plans, but then we'd have to kill you.